What about if people are constantly dealing with brain fog? This is something that a bunch of people that I've worked with over the years have complained about, that throughout the day, their thoughts always feel a little bit muddled. I get the sense that this will probably correlate with people who are also sleeping quite poorly, who are also probably using phones late at night. But what is brain fog? Have you ever looked at this clinically?
Oh yeah, a ton. We had a YouTube video about this that went really well. So I think the tricky thing about brain fog is, as a clinician, like, we see it frontline, and people don't really know what to do. So this is where it's interesting. I mean, I guess at this point I'm an expert in technology usage, but my actual like historic expertise is in evidence-based complementary and alternative medicine. And so what we're really seeing in brain fog, first of all, I think we have got to understand that your brain exists within a body. So, and we're seeing this more with like gut microbiome research and things like that. But for the longest time, at least in Eastern medicine, they didn't separate out mental health from other forms of things. Like, it's all one thing, right? Because the brain is connected to the body. So I think what we're also seeing a lot of brain fog is a symptom of long COVID. So that further demonstrates the kind of like autoimmune, inflammation-based results of brain fog. So I think that brain fog, in my opinion, is really probably some kind of low-level inflammation that is going on. So usually when I'm trying to help people with brain fog, it's kind of weird, but it's not much psychological stuff. Like, I don't think it's like problems with your emotions or psychotherapy. It's usually more physiologic stuff. So anti-inflammatory diet, even when it comes to stuff like sleep, I think a lot of people don't realize that, especially if you use like marijuana or like edibles or CBD to help you sleep, it affects your REM cycles. It affects your, sleep stage architecture and things like that. So a lot of times people will use things to fall asleep, but don't really recognize or acknowledge that the quality of sleep that they're getting is pretty low. I have a kind of a personal theory, which I've implemented with a couple of patients, which, none of this is medical advice. But, I've tried using, and when you talk to patients, you have to consent them appropriately and stuff, right? So I'll teach them Shirshasana, which is a headstand, which seems to help with everything else. So even in potentially increasing blood flow to the brain could help. But I think really sort of focusing on anti-inflammatory measures, turmeric, things like that can really help people with brain fog.
Do you know what's happening with brain fog? What is it? Like, what's going on inside of the brain?
So my guess is that there's just low levels of inflammation and that sort of correlates with immune activation within the brain. And it could be coming from other places too.
And the felt sense of that is slower thoughts, more confusion, less clarity, less precision, etc.
Right. So if you look at it, the first thing that we sort of know if we review our, neuroanatomy and stroke architecture is that we know that certain psychological and physiologic problems are focal. So that's one part of the brain. But with brain fog, everything is messed up, a small to medium to even severe amount. So it's a global effect. So if we're talking about global effects, the sources are probably going to be stuff like inflammation or hormones or things like that, stuff that affects all of your brain. And so I think a lot of that stuff also with the COVID, it sort of suggests that there's some kind of ongoing immune reaction, or even hopefully not damage, which I don't think we really see with COVID in the brain. You can get strokes and stuff, but that's more clotting stuff. But, so I think it's probably low level of inflammation is my best guess.
One of my friends has just started working with a new glucose monitor company. And when you get your always on glucose monitor and you put it on the back of your arm, it comes with, I think, 4 muffins. So you get it delivered, you get your glucose monitor, and with your glucose monitor are 4 huge, super sugary, high-calorie muffins. And on one of the days that you don't have anything to do in the morning, you have to wake up, and immediately upon waking, you eat 2 of these muffins. And you track what's happening. Are you watching your glucose shoot up through the ceiling? But you're not allowed to train. You're not allowed to eat anything else. You can't exercise. You can't do stuff to try and get that off. And the lesson to learn, apparently, from this, apart from the fact it's how does your body respond to glucose, how quickly is it able to clear it whilst it's not training, whilst it doesn't have other things, et cetera, is also the felt sense of this is what tons of sugar in your bloodstream feels like. And then for lunch, you have another muffin. So you've had
Oh,
two
boy.
for breakfast, and then you have another one for lunch. And again, it's just one of the most interesting things beyond this is how my body is able to metabolize glucose and get it out of the bloodstream and all this stuff that he learned. One of the other things was he had a number that he was able to now attach to his felt sense of what high blood sugar felt like. And everybody knows if you've had a huge binge one evening, you end up having a ton of cookies or something else. And I can sometimes feel it in my joints. I can sometimes feel it. It's like throbbing. My entire body is throbbing because I'm just so fucking inflamed. And I wouldn't say that I'm hypersensitive to this, but you know, everyone can push it. If you get a bag of Haribo Tang Fast Sticks in front of you or something and you go, I've just eaten 100 grams of sugar there. That's an awful lot.
Yeah, I think something that people don't really appreciate is that we have symbiotic bacteria, and the bacteria that grow in our gut. So a lot of people will will take probiotics every day, whereas I think it's science without understanding. So if we think about, okay, what determines the bacteria in your gut? It's what you feed it. So some bacteria are able to digest complex carbohydrates. Some bacteria are able to digest simple carbohydrates. The ones that we've sort of learned are friendly, which trigger less of an immune response, are the bacteria that have been in our guts for thousands, tens of thousands, millions of years. And those are the ones that eat like root vegetables. They help us digest those things. And now what started to happen is we see all this, how does food cause inflammation? Like we know that fast food causes inflammation, sugar causes inflammation. It's because when we eat these kinds of foods, it selects for, we're fertilizing another kind of bacteria that normally doesn't belong there because like Twinkie eating bacteria were not symbiotic. So now our immune system is like, hey, this bacteria doesn't belong here, but those are the ones that we keep feeding. And so a lot of this inflammation that we're kind of seeing, I've seen a lot of stuff around gluten recently where there's a guy in Austin actually who uses this strain of gluten that's like 800 years old, doesn't trigger celiac problems for people and things like that.
No way.
Yeah. And so
that's cool.
It's really interesting, right? So there's no scientific studies on it yet, but I think we're really starting to see that a lot of this stuff like diet and things like that, which is usually how we manage brain fog. I myself had really bad brain fog after COVID and went through this whole Ayurvedic regimen and was back to normal. And so it was, you know, I think that we really inflammation oriented.
We'll get back to talking to Dr. K in 1 minute, but first I need to tell you about Manscaped. If you are a gentleman who needs to trim his sensitive areas and you are still using an old face shaver from 5 Christmases ago, what are you doing? Join us here in the modern world. There are purpose-built tools for the job, and the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 is the greatest ball and body hair trimmer ever created. It features a cutting-edge ceramic blade to reduce grooming accidents, a 90-minute battery, which allows you to take a longer shave, or if you're just a particularly hairy gentleman, waterproof technology, which allows you to groom in the shower, and an LED light, which illuminates grooming areas for a closer and more precise trim, or if you just want to do it at night, perhaps. It's also got a wireless charging system to help the battery last even longer. But best of all, you can get 20% off everything site-wide from Manscaped and free shipping if you go to manscaped.com/modernwisdom and use the code modernwisdom at checkout. That's manscaped.com/modernwisdom and modernwisdom at checkout. What's happening, people? If you enjoyed that, then press here for the full unedited episode. And don't forget to subscribe. Peace.